pets and people, no other than Miss Julie Marty-Pearson.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Daniel.
Welcome to Book 101. Miss Julie, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Hi, everyone. I am Julie Marty-Pearson, podcaster, speaker, coach, and advocate. I'm coming to you from Bakersfield, California, and I am all about empowering people to share their stories through podcasting.
Miss Julie Marty-Pearson, thank you so much for empowering the world as a podcaster and, of course, a speaker, coach, and advocate for pets and people. So let's talk about the podcasting itself. What inspired you to start a podcasting?
So after the pandemic, I started a coaching business. And as I was learning and building and starting, podcasting was really big in 2020, 2021, and I got into it more. So as I started my business, I started taking courses, and one was on podcasting. So I took a course and learned how to do it. But then got stuck on why I'm doing it and what I was going to talk about. So,
Why? Why? What is the most important thing a new podcaster should focus on first?
make sure you are passionate about what you're talking about. That was my sticking point before I launched. I was career coaching at the time and I just couldn't do it. And I realized because I just wasn't excited about it or passionate. So I went to one of my passions I've had my entire life, which is my love of animals. And so I started the story of my pet for fun. I didn't edit, I didn't do anything. I just had friends come on and talk about pets. And now, 3 years later, it's a top 5% podcast. And I've met people all over the world who love pets just as much as I do.
Congratulations for being top five popular show globally. We salute you for hard work and for sure patience, resilience, and many more. Podcasting is something else, people. You need to have a passion, as Miss Julie said. Even if you have this something day that you don't like to do it, but you have the passion to do it, you need to do it because you have the
Yes.
dedication. So, what are your top tips for keeping listeners engaged during an episode?
Well, I really love to focus on the storytelling aspect of it. And I feel like if we're doing good interviews and infusing stories or telling stories on a solo, storytelling reels people in and makes them want to stay till the end. And
Yes.
so that is one way that I have learned. Um, but I've also learned that, if you're being really authentic, and if I'm having a very authentic conversation connection with my guest, people feel that. And I found that's when they really keep listening. They want to hear all of it. They want to hear all the different things we're going to talk about.
True. Totally agree with you, Miss Julie. How important is podcast equipment and what basic setup do you recommend for beginners?
So, I work with a lot of indie podcasters like myself, which means you either do it all yourself or you have maybe one or two people helping, right? So,
Yes.
I never want people to spend a lot of money on equipment. I use a Samsung Q2U. It's great. You can use it in a lot of different ways, and it's not super expensive. I would say a mic, headphones, maybe some lighting if you're going to do video, and a reliable Wi-Fi connection. I think those are the things. If you really want to start, those are the basics. Get those first before you buy all the other stuff.
Yes, reliable Wi-Fi, people. It's not something else. What one common mistake new podcasters make, and how can they avoid it?
So I would say one of the big things is your expectations. that
Mm.
you're going to start your podcast and blow up and bum, bum, bum. And maybe that could happen, but that's very, very unlikely. And so, what I really try to focus on when I'm helping someone is realistic expectations of the outcome of putting it out, but also having the time to keep it going. A lot of people will launch, but they don't really put the infrastructure in place. So I really want people to have realistic expectations of it's going to be a long game in terms of growth, but it's also important for you to plan ahead and have the time and space to continue it. Because if you're putting all that effort into launch, you don't want to put 5 out and stop.
Yes. Consistency, people, is one of the key ingredients in podcasting. It's not just like you begin it and on the first year only you are consistency, and then the second season you stop and procrastinating. For sure, your podcast will end for nothing. Just like you're planting a tree. Once you plant the tree, you need to nurture it, you need to fertilize it until it will bear fruit. So, what do you prepare for the interviews with guests?
Well, I don't do like anything scripted. I don't have certain questions I have to ask every time. I really love interviewing people and kind of pulling their story out of them, but also seeing where the conversation takes us, right? Whether it's my
Yes.
podcast about podcasting or my one about pets, either way, the connection between me and my guest is what's going to, flow and see where we go. So, I really want people to be prepared for an interview. And so one of the things I've been doing is doing more upfront info to make sure my guests know exactly what to expect and how it's going to go and what's going to happen. So I think that's really important. But one of the things I have also learned on the other side as a guest is, sometimes as podcasters, we assume they know to have a mic, to have a quiet space, to have Wi-Fi, and
True.
not everybody who's a guest has done it before, and they are probably many people are brand new to podcasting. So I've really learned,
True.
I've actually started doing some classes on podcast guesting to help people prepare better, find better matches. Like, don't just go on podcasts to go on podcasts, make it connect to what you do and your business. So those are definitely some big tips I like to share with people.
Very well said, Miss Julie, and nice tip. What's the best way to promote a new podcast and grow an audience?
Mm. So, the first thing I will say is you don't have to be everywhere at first, but you want to find your top 2 or 3 platforms and focus your effort there. So, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever that may be for you. You want to stick to it and be consistent and grow before you add another platform and another platform. But I have learned that, YouTube and Substack are really doing a lot around podcasting. And I
Yes.
think that either or of those or both is a good thing to include when you launch, because those are spaces you can really connect with people you don't already have in your other social media audiences. And so I really encourage people, I talk to people all the time like, oh, I don't want to do video. I hate video. It's like, it's okay. You can connect your audio only RSS feed to YouTube and it will overlay it over your cover. And I do both. I show video as well as the audio on my YouTube channel, and people listen to both. Not everybody wants to see the video, but you still don't have to put yourself in front of the camera if you don't want to.
Yes. You have the freedom to choose, people, to make your podcast more and more available to our listeners. What advice do you have for making a podcast sound more professional?
Mm, yeah. That's important. Although I will say, and again, it depends on your niche or your topic, that I have learned that listeners care less about fancy audio and music and all of that than they do about the content. They want like authenticity, they want good information, they want to learn. But there are some really easy fixes. One of the things I like to share, I use Descript for my audio and video editing, and they have this magic button called Studio Sound. And you can click that over your whole episode, and it goes through and levels and checks for
Everything.
things. So that is something I tell new podcasters, especially if they're new to the editing process too. That button can really help. And then other platforms, like my host is Buzzsprout, and within Buzzsprout you can also add on something they call magic mastering, which does something similar. So there are easy ways for you to fix a little bit and make it sound better, but the key is a good mic, a room that is not going to echo, and a space that isn't going to have a bunch of interactions or background noise. Those are really the keys.
Yes. Quiet people. How do you handle nerves or stage fright before recording?
That's a good question. Yeah, I deal with that a lot more on my pet podcast because I'll meet people who have never been on a podcast before as a guest or don't really understand what's coming. So before I record, I always get on with my guests and talk to them, and I can get a sense of how nervous they are, how comfortable they are. I allow them to ask me any questions they have. So that's kind of how I help. But if I find someone who's really nervous and I know they have a great story to share, but they're really reluctant to come to be a guest, I will work with them one on one and just kind of tell them, walk them through it. This is how it's going to go. And, it's going to be different. And, if it's an edited podcast, like I love to tell mine, it's like, if there's something you say you don't want, I'll just cut it out.
For sure, the power of editing, people. I hate editing, but it's good for the episode itself. What tips do you have for keeping episodes consistent in a quality and schedule?
And I will be the first to admit this is not a strong suit of mine. I have taken many breaks, some for lack of, motivation, others for just life. Life happens, right?
Mm.
Consistency is key to growth. But I've also learned that, your listeners are listening because they connect with you and they like you. And so when I have taken breaks, which I actually took almost 6 months off my pet podcast, people were listening. They came back. They were there. They want more. So I've also found there's a sense of community that when you build that connection and that consistency, especially in the beginning, it's okay if you take a week off or a month off in the summer or whatever it is. Again, that's your choice. You have the power to do whatever you want. But the consistency is really important. And I also say if you're stuck and having a hard time keeping going, lacking motivation, find your community, find a group to network with, find other podcasters to hang out with, because the one thing that's kept me going are other podcasters. Watching them do great things, it keeps me motivated and keeps me continuing to do what I'm doing and not let the voices in my head stop me.
Sometimes we podcaster procrastinate too. So, oh, I'm lazy now to do this, interviewing people, doing all those things, editing and everything. But we always motivate ourselves that we strive the best, we strive for the better, and we salute Miss Julie Mary Pearson for doing that. And we give you a big, big hand. We salute you for being a good podcaster. What are your thoughts on solo episodes versus guest interviews?
So I think they're important, especially if your podcast is directly related to your business in some way. Like, I tell people there's no reason not to do a variety of formats in your podcast because interviews are great, but they don't showcase you as much as they showcase your guest, right? So
Yes.
I heard a speaker at Podfest this year that said, you don't need sponsors, you don't need ads, you're the sponsor. Your business is the sponsor. Your ads are about your business. So solo episodes are really important for that. because that's where you get to show your experience, your expertise, how you help people, how you have helped people. You can teach in those. If you're giving them little pieces of great info, they're going to keep listening. They're going to be like, she knows what she's talking about and she can help me. And, we can't always show as much of that about ourselves in an interview like right now, right? Daniel isn't talking much about his own business or his own thing. He's asking me about mine, which is great because that gives you a broader audience to tap into. But you need those solo episodes to share who you are, share your journey, what you've learned, what didn't work for you, what does work for you. All of that, those solo episodes are really important to make those connections.
Truly, truly true, people. And I do only my solo if we are doing my anniversary and something that I'm telling to myself, oh, my podcast is belong to 5% popular show globally. And I'm very thankful for my listeners, my solid listeners. So, Miss Julie, what's the best way to monetize podcast if someone is just starting out?
You know, definitely it's important for your podcast to make sense with your life, with your business, your brand, so that you can monetize through the podcast because it's not easy. You're not going to overnight get to numbers where you can get ads and all of that. And you don't even necessarily want that. You want to be offering something to people through your podcast, whether it's coaching or, templates or a book or whatever it is that you do. That for me has been the easiest way to monetize, making it connected to my business and then connected to things that I offer. But also for my pet podcast, which is not directly tied to my business, I have used a variety of things. I've created my own merch stores, and I've also done some affiliate marketing. So I have a CBD company that makes it for pets and people. And so, I have an affiliate code. Well, I do my own host read ads talking about the CBD and how it's helped me and my pets. So that has brought in some money, which helps to cover, the hosting costs for that podcast. So it really is key to figure out what is the focus and why you're doing your podcast and then make the monetization options directly related to that, right? I'm not talking about my
Yes.
coaching business much on the pet podcast. So that doesn't really move it, but it's also shows I know how to podcast. I've been doing it. So it's also shows my experience and expertise. So that's really what I've had to learn is what are the right monetization pathways for me based on what my podcast is about and what I want to do with it.
Miss Julie, what will be your short term and long term goals as a podcast host?
So long term, my biggest goal is consistency and growth. Long term, I've got some pretty big ideas in my head. I have an idea ruminating around Podcast Your Story Productions, whether that would be a network or a media company that helps people in a variety of ways. So I'm really all in on podcasting, and my long term goals are just to expand in the ways that make sense and take all of the opportunities I'm given, especially for collaboration. And I know that, the last year has been a big change for me. So I know another year, another 5 years, it's kind of unlimited opportunities at this point.
Good luck to your goals, Miss Julie, and more and more and more success episodes to come. So, what would be your advice for those people out there want to start podcasting itself?
Mm. Well, don't spend a ton of money on fancy tech. Don't spend a ton of money on fancy coaching or packages or all of that. You need to figure out what it is you want to do a podcast about and why. Why are you doing it? Is it for fun? Is it for a side hustle? Is it for because you have a book or a community or a business? So that really is what and why. You really got to figure those out before you should do anything. Spend any money, buy any equipment. Because if you don't know that, the rest of it will be wasted time and space. That is the thing I tell everyone. And a lot of times when I meet women who think they want to have a podcast or want to learn more, it's really about me being their coach and figuring out why and what it would look like and what's best. I've met people where guesting is better for them than hosting their own, or vice versa, or like me, they want to do both. So it really is about you and why you want to do this and what is it going to do for you and or your business, because if you don't know that, the rest of it is just technique and setup that you don't want to do until you're doing it for the right reasons.
Thank you for your advice, Miss Julie. I hope people will follow you. How do you measure the success of a podcast beyond just download numbers?
Yeah, don't get stuck on the downloads, and I only say that as a person who did. I am a math person.
Likewise.
I used to work in higher ed, and I did a lot of research and assessment. I had taught statistics, so I love that stuff. But I was very stuck on the downloads. And if you stick there, you're never going to go anywhere because downloads change all the time in terms of what they mean and how they calculate it and all of that. So one of the ways I've started to really look at success is by looking at who's listening and where are they. When I see people all over the world listening, I've been on top lists for my pet podcast in Pakistan and Ireland and um, India and Canada. Like, none of those countries am I specifically targeting, but people are listening everywhere. So when I look at an episode and maybe it has 100 downloads, I'm like, man, I thought that was going to be good. But I go over here and look at it that 25 different countries listen to it. Like, that is the success of me knowing my message, my story, and my guest stories are really going out there and being impactful.
Totally agree with you. Miss Julie, we have different measurement of success. So, Miss Julie, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my audiobooks, people. Audiobooks, Book 101 Review, Volume 3 Suggestions, Book 101 Review, Volume 2 Selected, and Book 101 Review, Volume 1 Highly Recommended. These are the product of my first season on Book 101 Review, and of course, my self help book, Strategy of Existence, Weaving the Tapestry of Life, Stand Tall, Stand Together, Breaking the Chains of Bullying. Life is too short, a journey of discovery, fulfillment, and joy. Please do support and listen on Audible, and of course, my climate change book, Earth Fever, Unraveling Climate and Our Race to Restore Balance. Please do listen to them because one of the best sellers on Audible. So, Miss Julie, can you share a favorite moment or highlight from your own podcasting journey?
Yeah, so about a year and a half ago, when I decided to focus my coaching business on podcasting too, I had someone reach out to me that wanted to meet and talk about her podcast idea. And she told me how she had had a coach for podcasting and she'd put it out and it stopped. But that coach had told her her first idea, what she really wanted to do her podcast about, was stupid. No one would listen to it. That's what her coach told her. Well, she came to me because her idea was to have a podcast called Soul Dog, about people's soul dog, dogs that have connected with them so profoundly they changed their life. Well, her other coach said no one wants to hear a podcast about people talking about their dead dogs. And it was like, so she just thought she's a coach, she knows what she's talking about. And then she came upon my podcast, The Story of My Pet, and realized I was talking about pets, I was talking about dogs, I was talking about pets who had passed. So that's why she reached out and she told me her idea, and I said, of course, I know plenty of people that'll do it. And I send many guests to her, but I helped her launch because she knew I believed in her. She knew I knew what I was doing, but she also knew that I could help her in ways that other coach never did. And I got to be her first episode and talk about my own soul dog, Champ. And I've sent her many great guests as well to do the same. And so that's what got me really realizing this is the right space for me in my business, but also that I can make a difference to people in a variety of ways.
Miss Julie Marty-Pearson. Thank you so much for sharing your podcast to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your podcasts?
Yes, please come to my website, juliemartypearson.com. Listen to my podcast, Podcast Your Story Now, and check out The Story of My Pet on thestoryofmypetpodcast.com. Please share with your friends, listen, follow, subscribe, and check out my YouTube channel.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Julie Marty-Pearson because if you support her, more and more and more empowering pets episodes to come. So, Miss Julie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It was great to talk to you.
More to come, people. See you soon.